Welcome to the show that teaches you the things your parents and teachers are too afraid to, the Helios blog. Today, Slavoj Zizek debates Jordan Peterson. Here we go.
The reason she's alone is because she's difficult.
Women are not accepting the bare minimum.
Women fuck men they respect.
All the women who say things like, I'm strong, independent, I don't need no man, like, y'all impress me.
Women just gaslight each other and say what they want to hear.
The irony of how Peterson and I, the participants in this duel of the century, are both marginalized by the official academic community. I'm supposed to defend here the left liberal line against neoconservatives. Really? Most of the attacks on me are now precisely from left liberals. Just remember the outcry against my critique of LGBT plus ideology. And I'm sure that if the leading figures in this field were to be asked if I am fit to stand for them, they would turn in their graves even if they are still alive. So let me begin by bringing together the three notions from the title: happiness, communism, capitalism. In one exemplary case, China today. China in the last decades is arguably the greatest economic success story in human history. Hundreds of millions raised from poverty into middle-class existence. How did China achieve it? The 20th century left was defined by its opposition to the two fundamental tendencies of modernity: the reign of capital with its aggressive market competition, the authoritarian bureaucratic state power. Today's China combines these two features in its extreme form: strong authoritarian state, wild capitalist dynamics. And it's important to note, they do it on behalf of happiness of the majority of people. They don't mention communism to legitimize their rule. They prefer the old Confucian notion of a harmonious society. But are the Chinese any happier for all that? Although even the Dalai Lama justifies Tibetan Buddhism in Western terms of the pursuit of happiness and the avoidance of pain, happiness as a goal of our life is a very problematic notion. If we learned anything from psychoanalysis, it is that we humans are very creative in sabotaging our pursuit of happiness.
Indeed.
Happiness is a confused notion. Basically, it relies on the subject's inability or unreadiness to fully confront the consequences of their desire. In our daily lives, we pretend to desire things which we do not really desire, so that ultimately the worst thing that can happen is for us to get what we officially desire. So I agree that human life of freedom and dignity does not consist just in searching for happiness, no matter how much we spiritualize it, or in the effort to actualize our inner potentials. We have to find some meaningful cause beyond the mere struggle for pleasurable survival. However, I would like to add here a couple of qualifications. First, since we live in a modern era, we cannot simply refer to an unquestionable authority to confer a mission or task on us. Modernity means that, yes, we should carry the burden. But the main burden is freedom itself. We are responsible for our burdens. Not only are we not allowed cheap excuses for not doing our duty, duty itself should not serve as an excuse. We are never just instruments of some higher cause. Once traditional authority loses its substantial power, it is not possible to return to it. All such returns are today a postmodern fake. Does Donald Trump stand for traditional values? No, his conservatism is a postmodern performance, a gigantic ego trip. In this sense,
Agreed.
Of playing with traditional values, of mixing references to them with open obscenities, Trump is the ultimate postmodern president. If we compare Trump with Bernie Sanders, Trump is a postmodern politician at its purest, while Sanders is rather an old-fashioned moralist. Conservative thinkers claim that the origin of our crisis is the loss of our reliance on some transcendent divinity or higher value. If we are left to ourselves, if everything is historically conditioned and relative, then there is nothing preventing us to indulge in our lowest tendencies. But is this really the lesson to be learned from mob killing, looting, and burning on behalf of religion? It is often claimed that, true or not, religion makes some otherwise bad people do good things. From today's experience, I think we should rather stick to Steve Weinberg's claim that while without religion, good people would have been doing good things and bad people bad things, only something like religion can make good people do bad things. More than a century ago, in his...
Interesting. Oh, so he's arguing against... Okay, he's making like a million points here. Let's... He just keeps going on and on and on. Let's see Jordan's response here. Let's see Jordan's
desperately trying to confront serious problems. I mean, for example, when I mentioned China, I didn't mean to celebrate it. That worries me terribly. My God, is this our future?
No.
Sorry for this. Sorry, please. Discount, take away this from my 10 minutes.
No problem. No problem. Dr. Peterson, 10 minutes to you to reply.
So I like to speak extemporaneously, but Dr. Zizek's discussion was so complex that there's no way that I can juggle my responses spontaneously. So, okay, yeah, well, and achievement managed, I would say. So I heard
nice, good faith debate here.
Much of what I heard, I agreed with, but we can get to that. I'm going to respond.
Keep that. Pull out the knife.
All right. Well, I heard a criticism of capitalism, but no real support of Marxism. And that's an interesting thing, because for me, the terms of the argument were, well, there were three terms of the argument, let's say. There was capitalism, there was Marxism, and there was happiness. And I would say Dr. Zizek focused probably more on the problems of capitalism and the problems of happiness than on the utility of Marxism. And that actually comes as a surprise to me, because I presumed that much of what I would hear would be a support of something approximating traditional or even a-traditional Marxism, which is why I organized the first part of my talk as an attack against Marxism per se. Okay, so now Zizek points out that there are problems of capitalism. And I would like to say that I'm perfectly aware that there are problems with capitalism. I wasn't defending capitalism, actually, in some sense. I was defending it in comparison to communism, which is not the same thing. Because as Winston Churchill said about democracy, you know, it's the worst form of government there is, except for all the other forms. And so you might say the same thing about capitalism, is that it's the worst form of economic arrangement you could possibly manage, except for every other one that we've ever tried. And I'm dead serious about that. I'm not trying to be flippant. I mean that it isn't obvious to me, when Dr. Zizek is speaking in more apocalyptic terms, it isn't obvious to me that we can solve the problems that confront us. You know, and it's also not a message that I have been purveying that unbridled capitalism per se, as an isolated, what would you say, social economic structure, actually constitutes the proper answer to the problems that confront us. So I haven't made that case in any of the lectures that anything I've written or any of the lectures that I've done, because I don't believe it to be true. He said, well, what's the problems with capitalism? Well, the commodification of cultural life, all life, fair enough. There's something that isn't exactly right about reducing everything to economic competition. And capitalism certainly pushes in that direction. Advertising culture pushes in that direction. Sales and marketing culture pushes in that direction. And there's reasons for that, and I have a certain amount of admiration for the necessity of advertisers and salesmen and marketers. But that doesn't mean that the transformation of all elements of life into commodities in a capitalist sense is the best way forward. I don't think it is the best way forward. I think the evidence for that's actually quite clear. There is, by the way, a relationship. This is something I didn't point out before. There is a relationship between wealth and happiness. It's quite well defined in the psychological literature. Now, it's not exactly obvious whether the happiness measures are measures of happiness or whether they're measures of the absence of misery. And my sense is, as a psychometrician who's looked at these scales, that people are...
When people say they're happy, they actually mean not miserable and relatively comfortable.
Are more concerned with not being miserable than they are with being happy.
That's
those
true.
are all actually separate emotional states mediated by different psychobiological systems. But it's a technical point, but it's an important one. There is a relationship between absolute level of income and self-reported lack of misery or happiness. And it's pretty linear until you hit, I would say, something approximating decent working class income. And so what seems to happen is that wealth makes you happy as long as it keeps the bill collectors at bay. Like once you've got to the point where the misery is staved off as much as it can be by the fact that you're not in absolutely economically dire straits, then adding more money to your life has no relationship whatsoever to your well-being. And so it's clear that past a certain minimal point, additional material provision is not sufficient to, let's say, redeem us individually or socially. And it's certainly the case that the radical wealth production that characterizes capitalism might produce a fatal threat to the structure of our social systems and our broader ecosystems. Who knows? I'm not absolutely convinced of that for a variety of reasons. I mean, Zizek pointed out, for example, that there are more forests in Europe now than there were 100 years ago. There's actually more forests in the entire northern hemisphere than there were 100 years ago. And the news on the ecological front is not as dismal as the people who put out the most dismal news would have you think. And there is some possibility. That doesn't mean that there aren't elements of it that are dismal. You know, what we've done to the oceans is definitely something catastrophic, and we definitely have our problems. But it is possible that human ingenuity might solve that. What else? There are inequalities generated by capitalism, a proclivity towards a shallow materialism, the probability of corruption. The thing about that for me is those are catastrophes that are part of the struggle for human existence itself and not something to be laid at the feet of any given socio-political system, especially one that seems to be producing a fair modicum of wealth for the poorest section of the population and raising people up to the point where, you know, their lives aren't an unending day-to-day struggle for mere survival. There's some evidence, for example, that if you can get GDP up to about $5,000 per person per year, oh, that's GDP, that people start to become concerned about environmental degradation and start to take actions to prevent it. And so there is some possibility that if we're lucky, we can get the bottom billion or 2 billion people in the world, or 3 billion as the population grows, up to the point where they're wealthy enough so they actually start to care enough about the environment so that we could act collectively to solve environmental problems. Now you might say, well, by that time we'll be out of Earth. You know, we'll have exhausted the resources that are in.
Probably not, but also it's a very interesting idea. The idea that you're giving the people just enough to be effective. I wonder, but to what end, right? It feels almost nefarious to manipulate people on such a grand scale. Let me know what you think in the comments.
In front of us so desperately that there's no hope of that, but I would like to remind you of a famous bet between Julian Simon and the biologist at Stanford who wrote, Paul Ehrlich, who wrote The Population Bomb. They bet, Ehrlich, who thought we were going to be overpopulated by the year 2000, bet Simon that by the year 2000, commodity prices would have increased dramatically as a consequence of evidence that we were running out of material resources. They made a famous bet over a 25-year period, and Ehrlich paid off Simon in the year 2000 because commodity prices went down and not up. And so there is no solid evidence that the fact that our population is growing and will peak out, by the way, at about 9 billion, there's no solid indication that the consequence of that is that we are in fact running out of necessary material resources. And so it's a danger, but it's not a danger that's proven. And there is some utility in considering that the addition of several billion more brains to the planet, especially if they were well-nourished brains, as they increasingly are, might help us generate enough problem solvers so that we can stay ahead of the looming ecological catastrophe as our population balloons outwards. Now, we're going to peak at 9 billion. It's not much higher than we are now, and it looks like we might be able to manage it. The other thing is that I didn't hear an alternative, really, from Dr. Zizek. You know, he admitted that the rise to success of the Chinese was in part a consequence of the allowance of market forces, and decried the authoritarian tendencies, and fair enough, that's exactly it. It also seemed to me that the social justice group identity processes that Dr. Zizek was decrying are, to me, a logical derivation from the oppression narrative that's a fundamental presupposition of Marxism. So there, I never heard a defense of Marxism in that part of his argument as well. And so for me, again, it's to ask, what's the alternative? I also heard an argument for egalitarianism, but I heard it defined as equality of opportunity, not as equality of outcome, which I see as a clearly defined Marxist aim. I heard an argument for a modified social distribution of wealth, but that's already part and parcel of most modern free market states with a wide variation. And
socialism is like that as opposed to communism, which exists in most Western countries in 2024. That's already a thing.
Appropriate variation of government intervention, all of which constitute their own experiment. We don't know how much social intervention is necessary to flatten the tendency of hierarchies to become tilted so terribly that only the people at the top have everything and all of the people at the bottom have nothing. It's a very difficult battle to fight against that profound tendency, much deeper than the tendency of capitalism itself, and we don't exactly know what to do about it. So we run experiments, and that seems to be working perfectly reasonably, as far as I can tell. Let's see. Well, I'll close with this. Capitalism in the free market, well, that's the worst form of social organization possible, as I said, except for all the others. There is a positive relationship between economics measured by income and happiness, or psychological well-being, which might be the absence of misery. I certainly do not believe, and the evidence does not suggest that material security is sufficient. I do believe, however, that insofar as there is a relationship between happiness and material security, that the free market system has demonstrated itself as the most efficient manner to achieve that.
It's very interesting. Normally Jordan speaks at a more measured pace. He's speedrunning this speech.
And that was actually the terms of the argument. So thus, if it's capitalism versus Marxism with regards to human happiness, it's still the case that the free market constitutes the clear winner. And maybe capitalism will not solve our problems. I actually don't believe that it will. I've in fact argued that the proper pathway forward is one of individual moral responsibility, aimed at the highest good. It's something for me that's rooted in our underlying Judeo-Christian tradition that insists that each person is is sovereign in their own right and a locus of ultimate value, which is something that you can accept regardless of your religious presuppositions, and something that you do accept if you participate in a society such as ours. Even the fact that you vote, that you're charged with that responsibility, is an indication that our society is structured such that we presume that each person is a locus of responsibility and decision-making of such import that the very stability of the state depends upon the integrity of their the integrity of their character. And so what I've been suggesting to people is that they adopt as much responsibility as they possibly can in keeping with that, in keeping with their aim at the highest possible good, which to me is something approximating a balance between what's good for you as an individual and what's good for your family, in keeping with what's good for you as an individual, and then what's good
so he is describing enlightened self-interest
for society in the larger frame, such that it's also good for you and your family. And that's a form of well, an elaborated, iterated game, a form of elaborated cooperation. It's a sophisticated way of looking at the ways society could possibly be organized, and I happen to believe that that has to happen at the individual level first, and that's the pathway forward that I see. And so that's my 10-minute commentary.
I go up again.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Dr.
I
Zizek.
already spent a little bit of my time. I will try to be as short as possible. So a couple of remarks and then my final point. Why I think this self-limitation of capitalism is needed. First, about happiness. Just a couple of remarks. Jordan, I want to ask you, but isn't it, am I dreaming? I think I'm not. I remember a couple of years ago, it was reported all around the world, some kind of investigation, percentage of people interviewed in different countries, do they feel happy with their life? And the shock was that some Scandinavian countries, which we considered social democratic paradise, were very low, while Bangladesh, I think, was close to the top. Now, I know this logic has a limit. I don't buy the bullshit of poor people are happy in their world there and so on. But you know, my argument here is not against you. My argument here is problematizing happiness even more. Look, this may interest you. I was years ago in I think, Lithuania, and we debated, I report on this in one of my books, when were people in some perverted sense, and this is the critique of the category of happiness for me, happy. And we came to the crazy result. After the Soviet intervention, Czechoslovakia in 1970s and 80s. Why? For happiness, first, you should not have too much democracy, because this brings the burden of responsibility. Happiness means there is another guy out there, you can put all the blame on him. And as the joke went in Czechoslovakia, if there is bad weather, a storm...
That's hilarious.
Oh, this communist screwed it up again.
Blame it on Trump.
That's one condition of happiness. The other condition, much more subtle one, is... And this was done in Czechoslovakia, those dark times after so. The life was relatively, moderately good, but not perfect. Like, there was meat all the time, maybe once a month there was not meat in the stores. It was very good to remind you how happy you are the other time.
I see. Yeah. That's very funny.
Another thing.
Electricity.
They had a paradise which should be at a proper distance. West Germany, affluence. It was not too far, but not directly accessible. You know. So it was so. Maybe in your critique of communist regimes, I agree.
Hilarious.
With you. You should more focus on something that I experience. Of, you know, don't look only at the terror, ultimately totalitarian regime. There was a kind of a silent, perverted pact between, at least in this late, a little bit more tolerant, but I still oppose them, communist regimes, between power and population. The message was, leave us the power, don't mess with us, and we guarantee you a relatively safe life, employment, private pleasures, private niche, and so on and so on. So I am not surprised. But again, this is not for me the argument for the communists, but against happiness. That, you know, people said when the wall fell down, what a wonder in Poland. My God, like Solidarność, which was prohibited a year ago, now triumph at the elections. Who could imagine this? Yes, but the true miracle, in a bad sense for me, was 4 years later, democratically ex-communists came back to power.
Literally.
So, you know, again, this is for me not the argument for them, but simply for the, let's call it, corruptive nature of happiness. So my formula, maybe you would agree with it, is, my basic dogma is happiness should be treated as a necessary byproduct. If you focus on it, you are lost. It comes as a byproduct of you working for a cause and so on. That's the basic thing for me. Second point, maybe we disagree here. China, of course, the miracle, economic miracle was due to unleashing market reform and so on. But, and here comes my pessimism. Some of my liberal friends are telling me, yes, imagine what would they have achieved with also political democratization. I'm a pessimist here. No, they found a perfect formula of how, and that's the paradox of China today. The Communist Party is the best manager of capitalism and protector against workers. The truly dangerous thing in China today is not to flirt with Western ideas, is to organize trade unions, to, you know, like this is what worries me. This perfect combination between unleashing capitalism and still the authoritarian rule, or to put it in another way, my worry is that today, all around the world, this eternal marriage between capitalism and democracy is slowly disappearing.
Right. Exactly. It's going to be capitalism combined with an authoritarian regime. I'm inclined to agree. I think that's actually where it's going to. I think he's totally right. Freedom will disappear. Against the worker and for money. Yep.
Till now, I admit it. Capitalism needed from time to time some 10, 20 years of dictatorship. When things started to improve, democracy returned. Chile, South Korea, and so on. I wonder if we are still at that. Now, just very quickly, your basic point in the introduction, your introduction. You know, I'm tempted to say, the way you presented Communist Manifesto, the simplified image, and so on, it's crazy to say, but on many points I agree with you, and it's a very complex argument. Marx didn't have, for example, a good theory of how social power exists. His idea was simply with disappearance of class structure. It's secretly, although he wouldn't have accepted it, a technocratic dream. Like, by experts, social life will be run as a perfect machine. Although he was at least aware of the problem, which is why he was so enthusiastic, Marx, about Paris Commune, you know, which was precisely not centralized power. So I'm not just defending Marx. I'm saying it was not clear to him. And so let's drop that. Maybe I have more interesting things to say. Another point. Nonetheless, at one point I'm ready to claim, where did you find this? This goes maybe for today's politically correct jerks and so on, that this egalitarianism. There is one passage in his late critique of Gotha program where Marx directly accesses the problem of equality. And he dismisses it as a strict bourgeois category. Explicitly. For him, communism is not egalitarianism. It's, yes, hierarchies, but not based on capitalism. Okay, I'm not totally defending here Marx. I'm just saying, don't reproach to Marx. Okay, but to conclude, because, yes, I want to keep my promise to be a little bit shorter. You know, I agree with you on many points, but you know what's my problem with, my problem that I was aiming at? With all the openings, I know we don't know really what is happening with ecology and so on. And this is okay, let's take oceans. You mentioned them. But isn't it, for me, correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't mean this rhetorically, maybe I'm really wrong, but the problem of oceans, the only way for me is some kind of cooperated international action and so on. You cannot simply leave it to the market. That's what I'm saying. This is the fateful limit that I see.
He seems very eccentric to me. I have heard of him in passing, but I've never actually heard him speak. Also, probably multilingual, right? Like probably 5 or 6 languages. Okay, anyway. let's end the video there. Hit the like, hit the sub, hit all notifications, drop me a donation. Like Hunter, Adrian R, Tom and Bobby, Dylan, Renaissance Press, Brian, Andrew, and Alan. Shout outs to you, most recent purchaser of Strategist Guide to Seduction. You can buy my books at bit.ly/heliosbooks. If you want to see my videos ahead of time, just go to my Patreon. That's patreon.com/theheliosblog. And if you'd like me to give you some good advice, just message me at theheliosblog@gmail.com. I do offer coaching services. Thank you so much for listening, guys, especially if you listen to the end. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.